Your phone is charging faster than it did last year, and nobody told you why. And the number on your power bill quietly stopped climbing. You'll see exactly what stalled it. The dread in your newsfeed has gone strangely quiet lately. That silence is a clue, not an accident. A warehouse robot somewhere in America decided on its own that a package was damaged before any person looked twice. And in Minnesota, a diagnosis reached a family's chart 3 years before any doctor could have caught it by eye. 5 separate rooms, 5 separate nights, one pattern connecting all of them. Each one is too small, too ordinary, too easy to scroll past, which is exactly why none of them made a headline. That's because progress rarely arrives as a single announcement. It accumulates for years inside labs and warehouses and clinics you will never visit. Then one quiet Tuesday, it reaches your nightstand, your mailbox, your doctor's office. Over the next 6 chapters, you'll meet the real labs, the real names, and the real dates behind every one of tonight's 5 quiet signals. The future isn't a single headline. It's 100 quiet Tuesdays in a lab until one of them reaches you. That faster charge on your nightstand traces back to a bench outside Brisbane. In mid-2025, a team here reported a solid-state chemistry that finally broke a charging speed limit that had held for years. The old limit wasn't the battery size, it was how many electrons got lost as heat on the way in. The new solid electrolyte closes most of those side paths, so almost all the charge actually reaches the cell. Less waste, less heat, more charge, sooner. That's the charge light you saw climb faster on the exact nightstand from a minute ago. Nobody in this building called it a miracle. They just logged it and moved to the next bench. A lab technician logs every cycle the cell survives, and the count is climbing into the thousands. But the technician logs the curve and frowns. Fast isn't the same as proven. Nobody here has run this cell past 10,000 cycles yet. And speed alone won't answer what happens after. But energy is only half the story. The next quiet Tuesday didn't happen in a lab on Earth at all. 3 billion years ago, something settled into a streak of Martian clay. A rover just read it. No photo came back, just a jagged little spike on a chemistry graph logged as sample tube 41. Call it a precursor, a chemical ancestor to whatever life here might have needed. Here's what the headline skips. A precursor isn't a fossil, isn't a verdict. It's a maybe. He said as much on the record, and the room just let it sit there. An engineer down the row has a smaller job. Keep the rover's drill arm alive for the next layer down. No press conference moment, just a graph and a job to finish. That clay hit your phone as a headline, one that wanted a verdict this lab wasn't giving. Which raises the real question. Can a maybe hold your attention as long as a verdict can? That's not the only feed gone quiet. On a warehouse floor, a machine just made a call nobody trained it to make. Nobody typed a command. A sorting arm looked at a package and decided something was wrong. This floor has run an agentic pilot since 2025, flagging damage before a human sees it. The arm reroutes the box to a repack station and keeps the belt moving. That's not a script. That's a judgment call. The arm was trained on thousands of damaged packages, not one rule for every dent. Since the pilot scaled, damage returns dropped by roughly 2/3, and night shifts needed fewer people. Fewer people at night isn't fewer jobs. The company moved them to inspection and training. The pressure isn't cruelty, it's competition. Same-day promises that break on one bad box. Remember that headline about robots stealing warehouse jobs? On this floor, that's not what happened. The supervisor still checks the numbers herself every night, because nobody yet knows what this floor does the one night she doesn't. The supervisor still checks the numbers every night, but the next quiet number waiting to be checked isn't on a warehouse floor. In a diagnostic imaging clinic in Minnesota, a radiologist opens a scan she's read 100 times before. This time, a pattern recognition system had already circled something on it, hours before she sat down. Researchers at the clinic reported in 2025 that the system had flagged a shadow consistent with early cancer, roughly 3 years before a radiologist would typically catch it on her own. Researchers are careful here. This is early-stage trial research. Nobody in this building says the word cure. Down the hall, a patient waits for what those 3 years actually mean for her. 3 years isn't a promise. It's a family getting to choose treatment on their own schedule, not the disease's. But this pattern hunter learned its eye at one kind of clinic, and the world holds many kinds of clinics. 3 years bought this family a choice they didn't know they'd get. The harder question is, who else gets that choice next? But every one of those thresholds, the battery, the clay, the warehouse, the scan, leans on something nobody in this film has shown you yet. In a facility built to hold both ordinary servers and an early quantum computing wing, an infrastructure engineer checks a rack that shouldn't be running this cool. Through 2025, chip labs quietly shipped processors that compute inside the same block where the memory sits. Less distance for a signal to travel means less power burned just moving numbers around. That saved power is why the Brisbane battery cell can run its charge curve model overnight instead of over a week. It's why the Mars sample readouts get cross-checked against years of mission data in minutes, not months. Every threshold this film showed you was never about the lab you saw. It was about the one underneath it. He doesn't call it exciting. He calls it plumbing and just shrugs it off. But this hallway is growing faster than the public conversation about what's inside it. No one elected this room, and this room sets the deciding speed for everything else in this film. The hallway of lights keeps stretching into the dark, each one echoing the phone on your nightstand. Nobody in that server hallway is elected to decide how fast it grows, but every one of those lights answers to the same table you're sitting at. Look at the table again, the phone, the bill, the feed. Same 3 objects since the very first minute. The charging light climbs faster because a solid-state cell outside Brisbane finally stopped wasting its own electrons as heat. The bill stopped climbing because a warehouse arm learned to catch its own mistakes before they became overtime and waste. That same warehouse arm decided the box was damaged on its own and rerouted it before anyone asked. That single judgment call is what a warehouse robot deciding on its own actually means. Less waste, watched every night by a person, not a ghost in the machine. The feed reads calmer for 2 reasons now. One of them has a name and a date attached. 3 years of early warning before a scan would normally catch a shadow. That bought one family a choice, not a guarantee. And the clay from Mars still hasn't given a verdict. It isn't going to. That was always the second reason for the calm. Sitting with a maybe, instead of demanding a headline, turned out to be the whole skill the feed was quietly teaching you. None of this was free. It came from labs under pressure to move faster than caution alone would choose. That pressure is the honest cost. The 100 quiet Tuesdays still happened anyway, one amber light at a time. The future isn't a single headline. It's 100 quiet Tuesdays in a lab until one of them reaches you. So tonight, check your own table. Which of these 3 is already quietly changing for you?